space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Just a quick reminder, tickets are still available for our conference, which is only a few weeks away now in Grafton, Illinois, May 13th through the 16th. Rebelsofdisclosure.com is where you can find all that information. And if you can't make it in person, I encourage you to get a live stream pass. Those are only $88. And if you join the Telegram group on the website, you can participate in the live Q&A at the end of every presentation and ask your own questions to the presenters from home via the live stream link. So that's a really cool feature. And it's right around the corner. So we are so excited to see you guys there. All that information is at rebelsofdisclosure.com. And a quick reminder, we have Hopewell Farm CBD has a 420 sale that is going through April 30th. JTT 420 gets you 20% off all of the CBD products on their website. That link is below as well. So today we are joined by Kerry Cassidy. I was just recently at the LA Alien event in LA, and she spoke there, and it was a great presentation. And the AI versus, or the transhumanism versus humanity panel that you spoke on was actually one of my favorite panels that I have seen in a while. And it was really good information. So there's so much to cover right now, and I just kind of want to hit the ground running and just, skip the small talk. Like this whole white hat situation right now, people are kind of confused on what's going on, because there's a lot of it appears very dark on the surface, and I know there's stuff going on behind the scenes that might not be apparent. And I was just wondering, like, what is happening? We have this invasion of the southern border right now, and I know there's always more that meets the eye, and maybe the people that are coming across the border aren't even human. I'm hearing they're potentially clones. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, actually, I've talked about that because I've been talking about the border invasion actually since 2016, when they rushed the border when Trump was running for office and then got in office. So that was actually photographed. A lot of the hordes of people that were coming up from, South America and Central America were happening then as well. So we have been more or less, I think during the time he was in office, they tried to crack down on that. But the minute he left office, then the whole thing switched around. So I have talked about this many times, but I'll talk about it again since you're asking about that. It's important to remember that the Great ET abduction program was initially interacting with our military, and the military made a deal with them to go and concentrate south of the border at that point. And this is many years ago. At this point, this is a very mature program. A lot of those people are like in 20s, 30s, and could even be in their 40s that are gray ET hybrids. And it is said to be a very successful hybridization program, which means that they have this certain kind of ET DNA. Now we're all a combination, as far as I'm concerned, and the studying I've done of many ET races we've been invaded many times over and over again. But the gray ET hybrid program is somewhat not so positive in certain ways, because yes, these people will have abilities. They can move things. A lot of times the grays are more mental than they are emotional. So they won't be really, as they grow up, they'll be less inclined to be what we call empathetic. Their emotional life is not as active. They're going to have a more mental life. And that, also gets into how their humanity, if you will. And that could begin to be a problem. The X-Men movies, in a sense, were warning people about this, if you look back.
Right.
And there's a very specific X-Men movie that I've talked about many times. It's the one with, what is it called? Oh God, I'm just getting a blank at the moment, but you know which one I mean. It had a young girl that was the star, really. And the guy who gets the swords out of his hands.
Oh, Wolverine?
Yeah, but it wasn't Wolf. It was called. Uh,
Origins, X-Men, the X-Men Origins.
no, it's got a one word name.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out.
Logan, I think.
Logan. Okay,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you're
So
right.
you
Yeah.
can go back and watch it. If you watch it with this in mind, it'll really make a lot of more sense to you, that whole movie. But anyway, so what we're talking about is this is happening. And this is also why those groups are headed for our border. A lot of them are, they've even been photographed in a mass movement where they don't actually look like they're conscious. They're a little more programmed. They're being, they're just moving according to what they're being told to do, because the gray ETs, a lot of them are run by AI, as are the reptilians and the Draco. And so there can be a takeover of their bodies and just their minds and so on. So this is what we're looking at. Also, there's a new video that just came out today that I was watching of a young, I think it was a Marine, talking about how there's evidence that the cartels are now stealing our equipment, our military equipment, and taking it back across the border. So, and along the border. So
And
this is, again, part and parcel of the whole invasion scenario. It is an invasion scenario. Okay. Make no mistake about it. In fact, we are being invaded on many levels, not only the CCP and the Biden show, as I call it, and that whole puppet show. But on top of it, we've got this other ET invasion coming from a certain group of ETs. And then if you understand who's running the CCP in China, I was told even a different race of ETs, and in part the Dracos, are probably running China as well. So there's these aspects of, these are ET races also that are not necessarily friendly with each other. Okay. And so it's kind of interesting that the US has become like this target for invasion and takeover. And so we're fighting on many fronts. And hopefully the White Hats know this. I try to talk to them ever since the beginning. I write, I write letters in the forms of articles. I do interviews and been talking about this for a long time. I also dialogue directly behind the scenes with Juan. I send him messages. He used to answer me and doesn't anymore, because he's afraid he's going to violate his security oath and blow it by saying some truth that I'm supposed to not know, so on and so forth. But anyway, so we're in a situation where, and I was just posting today on my Telegram, and if you don't follow my Telegram, I can't stress it enough, because I put everything but the kitchen sink on there. I just really, if I'm surfing the web, if I'm doing investigations, I post it there. So you're going to get a huge amount of stuff that is not just cookie cutter, okay, which a lot of those people that are out there would have, don't do like the kind of stuff I do.
right.
So it can be quite fascinating. It's fascinating to me. I mean, so I think other people would find it fascinating too. And I do lots of commentary also. I
Yeah.
don't just post and walk away. And it doesn't mean that I agree with it. A lot of times I'll post something that, really makes me angry, and I'll start ranting about it or whatever. So if you really want to know, also when I'm doing a show, when I'm going live, all this goes on my Telegram, because I have a very large audience over there. So it makes sense for me to do the heads up there, as opposed to, I have a lot of social media that, I don't have the time to go through tell everyone I'm going live. Right. And so just saying that this ET invasion and the AI, it's coupled with AI, because the AI is also running the grays. This COVID, what we call COVID, is part of that ET invasion. People don't realize that. It was part of linking us to the Borg. They understand, or they might have heard about the AI connection, but they don't understand it came through the gray ETs.
Mhm.
According to Cyrus Parsa, it was a communication with our scientists via using their computers to interact with them and to tell them the formula by which to put the vax together and all that kind of thing. So when you're looking at that, and then you're also looking at 5G, the frequency being coupled with that, we're really under the gun right now in so many ways. And that means physically, psychically, emotionally, mentally. And so that's what's happening. Now, part of the reason for that is because of the rise in consciousness on our planet. At the same time that the negative rises, as you may appreciate, this the positive rises as well. And it's a constant battle
Right.
between the two. So that's really what's happening. And that is also because we've moved into an ascension level planet. And there is a great push on the darker side, which does involve things like ETs and the negative based ETs. Of course, there are positive ones that are fighting the fight with us and basically wanting to take us over and turn us into a certain kind of, Borg mentality and so on and so forth. So I know I'm kind of using broad brushes to describe this, but this is the playing field we're in. And I don't think enough people paint the playing field in this way. A lot of commentators out there, they shirk away from anything to do with certainly ET, and they don't understand that ETs and AI are completely linked. In fact, arguably, all ETs are AI and run by AI, and that's a different point of view, but you might want to look at that. And now it's beginning. I did a very interesting interview with Scott Perez, and then I did a sort of, I was on this it's a technical group thing. It's called FESIG, FESIG, and I'm just about to load it on my own channel a few weeks ago with Scott Perez, where he and I discussed the whole ET AI connection with what's going on, and the fact that he's a scientist. He's looked at our DNA. He believes our DNA is actually AI.
Right.
And so this is where you get into a very bizarre situation. And it gets into the idea, if you want to look at it like that, that we might be indeed in a kind of a hologram, I tend to liken it to a game anyway, that I think that always remember that your spirit and your soul are outside the game. Okay.
Yeah. Correct.
And this is the difference. Okay. So our physical body, our cell that's here, the avatar we use on the planet is, that. But our consciousness is actually in our higher self, et cetera, and our connection with source is outside the game. So in that sense, if you look at it like that, it might be easier to bear these hurdles that we have to jump through every single day and in our lives right now.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
You're making this really easy. You're answering all my questions, but it's amazing. I think it's great to summarize it like you do, because not everyone zooms out like that. People get hyper focused on certain surface level aspects of this war, not understanding what's actually driving it. And we could even take it into the topic of even secret space programs and understanding that whole world exists as well, that plays a huge role in, I think, what's happening. And a lot of people, we have this flat earth narrative, and that comes with there is no space. And I think that is definitely an inverted reality that they would like us to believe in, because if they trick people into believing that there is no space, then that means they can keep getting away with all the stuff that they're doing in space, and nobody's going to even, look there anymore. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't see it like that because, and I think part of the reason is that, before I was into this whole field, and even before I was a journalist, I was very much a spiritually oriented sort of seeker, if you will. And I studied all the Eastern philosophy, and I did this thing where I meditated every day, connected my chakras, and reached samadhi experiences, and have had those repeatedly through my life. Kundalini activation is one word for it, or two words. But anyway, so when I look at life and everything around us, I've always seen multiple dimensions because I was a psychic intuitive as a child, and I just started out life out that way. It just was the way I saw the world. So I don't see that there's no space. On the contrary, in the sense there's space, but there's also, it's kind of this thing where, you know, where you go into nano and you go into um, like, there's this book called Radical Abundance by Eric Drexler, I think is his name. And he's like the father of, I don't know what he's the father of, but it's like nano or AR, whatever. But it's my, you know, how they could build, you can go internally so far. It's never ending. You can also go externally so far. So space is the external part. The internal would be, you know, the reverse of that, but it's the same thing if you really think about it.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that people don't, you know, I'm not a flat earther, as they call it, but it is like what those people, as far as I'm concerned, are seeing is when you get into the fourth dimension, and I see things dimensional. So there's, you know, there's horizontal and there's the vertical. And so both are operational at any given time. And what we're talking about with the 4D people that are really concentrating on 4D, they see the world, they see it as a flat plane. That's how they see it in material reality. Okay. But material reality is a falsehood. It's an illusion. So we are not in, you know, we're not flat like a piece of paper. We're dimensional. Okay. And because we're dimensional, we have depth. Okay. So with depth, all that kind of thing. I'm not a physicist, but I can picture, I can feel it. I can see what we are inhabiting. And in the sense that I understand where this, first of all, I think it's a psyop. I do believe that they want you to think in terms of flatness, you know, or a lack of dimensionality to our experience, because that increases their power, I believe, as far as they're concerned, because they can then convince you that you're sort of trapped in that reality. Exactly. But I don't see it that way. I see it, as I say, dimensionally. And I know that we leave our body, we go elsewhere. There's a lot of, you know, dimensions you can travel in your light body, as it's called. There's also a parallel earth. So we've got, if you watch the TV show called Fringe, you're aware of that parallel earth idea and counterpart and so on. So, and I have stories to go with all this, you know, so this is where I'm at. I've always, you know, and also want to say that, you know, if you ever read my book, it's called Rebel Gene.
I've read it.
Me on the wall, but you'll see that I talk about being born in Moffett Field, okay, in Palo Alto, and that was a military base. And the bottom line is that I seem to have some kind of, first of all, I was manipulated as a child. I have a very extensive birthmark, what they must have done when I was still in my mother's womb, because I was born with it, trying to do something with me, some kind of genetic engineering or whatever the hell they're doing, but it left marks. And maybe that made me different from the beginning because I didn't see the world the same way or whatever. But I was, you know, like I said, born at Moffett Field as a military base and so on and so forth. So I've always been very oriented towards space, towards traveling in space. And of course, I've done 12 interviews with Captain Mark Richards, who was the captain of a Starship Enterprise type vehicle, and his experiences and so on and so forth. So when we look even at our you know, you could look at your head, you have a round head. That's what we are living on is like that. Everything, like, as you say, as above, so below, you know what I'm saying? So you can think about it however you want. You know, I'm not saying my way is the only way to think about it, but I can tell you that that is at least how I see it. And when we talk about going to the moon, people say, oh, you never went to the moon. No, that's not true. We went to the moon, but we had help. The ETs, we didn't go in those tin cans.
Right.
You know, I've seen those tin cans in person. I worked at Jet Propulsion Lab. That was one of the jobs I took after I left the entertainment industry, the movie industry, I actually got a job at JPL, as part of NASA. And I was at that job for like 2 years or so as a contractor. But I used to write screenplays on my lunch hours there and stuff like that. So I'm very, I can picture, I can travel. I also I co-locate, I do, things like that. I
Right.
do remote viewing that I've been accurate and I've tested myself in that. I've also, I have precog dreams, they come true, so I see life in this incredible way. I don't see it as a flat,
Right.
black or white. I don't see anything as like that.
One dimensionally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of people do. Yeah.
So,
And
right.
material reality, a lot of people are what you call materialists, and the Illuminati are materialists par excellence. So everything they do is aimed at trying to stay alive here forever, long life, and creating a body that they can keep going into different bodies. And they actually do that already. The death of anybody in the royal family has got another body waiting for them. Right.
It's
and
like
they have
they're
a reincarnational history that's also keeps in keeping with that.
right. It's like they're addicted to what Max Spears used to call the pleasures of the flesh.
Right.
And they're addicted to that, and they're trying to basically live forever. So they're trying to escape their own karma, and at least in their delusional mind. But
well, you already live forever. Like the real us, the soul is already eternal.
Yeah.
But they're so lost in the game that they want to stay forever in the game, so to speak, in 3D. And they're, like Tyler just said, they don't want to face their karma and have to deal with the repercussions or the consequences of their own actions, or have to, grow or expand. They want to just stay in the state they're in forever, basically. So,
well, it's like they don't know any other way. But a few things I wanted to say. I'm with you on the multi-dimensionality of everything. Everything's dimensional, and I think it explains jump rooms, how that works. If everything's a frequency away, you can walk into an elevator in LA, underground in LA, and end up on Mars or whatever. If we're talking different frequencies, I think that would explain jump room technology. And Daryl James, who was a former Navy Seabee, and he actually spoke at the same event you did. He was stationed at the St. Mawgan Royal Air Force Base in England, and his executive officer told him that the flat Earth psyop was actually created by Michael Aquino in 1980.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
Right. So it's really interesting, and
he's a Satanist, big time, of course.
Yeah.
Right. And
right. So there you go.
On the moon landing, I agree with you. We didn't get there in the tin cans, and a friend of ours who's a professional remote viewer, she actually remote viewed the moon landing. And it's a front loaded target, but the information, the data showed that we went there, but we didn't get there how we think we got there. And she said it was the first target she did where she actually was approached by somebody and asked to stop looking at that target. And but she still won't share the actual data publicly, what she saw on how we got there. But it was, I'm sure, ET technology. We had help, right? So
totally. Well, William Tompkins wrote a book about it, and actually a few books, and I interviewed him in depth on that.
Right.
He's not the only one. Captain Mark Richards talks about this as well, and other witnesses going back in Camelot forever. Every really witness who has been involved in the secret space program has been totally aware that we didn't, that Kubrick was doing a job. He was there to, cover for anything they couldn't show.
Right.
And, putting on a play, in a sense, for people. And there's evidence, by the way, the alien autopsy is another such event where they substitute a fake for the real when there is a real. So they like to do this all the time. So I would think that people should start realizing that there are patterns that they follow. And one of the patterns is also that going through history, we have had a lot of the Illuminati think in terms of, the light and the dark and transcending both. Okay. So they like to have two, because everything you do engenders its opposite. That's just a principle of the universe. So understanding that if you can control both sides, and now the white hats are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to mimic exactly what the Illuminati have been doing to run the planet forever and control people's minds, is to control both sides. So with that in mind, strangely, this is, I found out, in my research, growing over time, is that you find out that almost everything that's ever happened, they have been, toying with both sides. They're not always in control, though. That's kind of like a caveat, because just because you want to control both sides doesn't mean you can. There is the ghost in the machine, you might call it God, whatever you want to call it, but it's, there is the unknown, the element, the X factor, if you will, in life and in humanity and our destiny and everything. So if it wasn't for the X factor, you would have no wiggle room, in a sense, right? Everything would be either black or white, or, or both. And there would be no mystery to the,
right.
In a sense, you need that, the mysterious element. And as I say, that's sort of evidence of God, if you will, at work. And so I think in my mind, I like that idea. I like the idea that there is, in a sense, it brings oxygen into the room.
Yeah.
So it's like they don't own both sides. They try. And the White Hat's the same thing. We are having a dilemma right now, which, I hope this is okay to go in this direction with you, and I can stop and, allow for a question first. But what I would like to talk about is how right now the White Hats are controlling some of what we're seeing. And they're also purposely not controlling other parts of what we're seeing, so that they can allow those darker things to happen. It's not my favorite aspect of what the White Hats are doing, but they have a purpose behind their madness, so to speak, which is, it's in the Law of War manual, not Law of War, but the
Art of War.
Art of War, yeah. And Sun Tzu and all of that. So it's also, it would be an AI thing as well. So just
I agree
painting a picture here.
I agree with you. And it's like, what do they say? Never interfere with an enemy while they're destroying themselves. So
yeah, and they love to say that, but I think there's more to it than that. I don't think it's that simple. And I also don't think it's that simple in terms of human destiny and the overall progress or lack thereof that we're making as humanity through the cosmos, etc. In other words, like I said, you can try to own both sides. You can think you're controlling it, but it's actually very easy, especially when you're allowing the dark. You see, balancing and controlling the dark are two different things. And if you're allowing the dark, at what point are you not part of the dark? And then,
I was just going to say that, right?
Yeah. So, and then having
you become the very thing you started out against.
So, and this is demonstrated, by the way, in, people know, like the DEA and agents that pretend to be working for the other side. And then pretty soon they lose the context of which side is good anymore. And they're pretty, if it's a mob boss, he suddenly acts like a mob boss and kills people. And he's doing everything in the name of supposedly hiding on that side.
It turns into survival mode for the people who act as double agents, because there's blackmail and trees. I mean, there's so much, it's so convoluted. You can't really, it's not black and white, but an interesting perspective on, what you're saying right now is, again, back to Daryl James, who you should totally interview, by the way, if you haven't.
It sounds like a cool person.
He has one of the most credible secret space program testimonies I've ever heard, and we've interviewed everyone. But while he was stationed in St. Morgan, I told you, in England, his executive officer shared some stuff with him in 2005 about what we would be expecting in the future, because he told him under every military base is a they have looking glass technology, and they can look down the timeline and with 94% accuracy. And what they saw was basically all of this happening. And he asked, well, what do we do about it? And he says, nothing we actually do about it. It's something that we have to experience, because it has to get bad enough to where it affects us at a DNA level, so our children's children don't let this happen. He said if the white hats came in and cleaned up everything today, it would happen again in 100 years. So
Right.
it's something, it's not so much as like a war that we have to win, but it's a time we have to live through and experience. That's the way he explained it. So just another
Yes.
perspective.
No, that's true. And again, because it engenders its opposite. So if they, and this is the line, by the way, that both sides are treading. Okay. Even though the dark seems to be quite dark, it also is very wily, or they are, and they're totally aware of this principle. Okay. So it's governing their behavior as well. So we have, in a sense, we've got what was supposed to be the good guys and the bad guys basically doing the same thing and switching sides, so that the good guys are doing what the bad guys should have or were going to do. And instead they, you know what I'm saying, how that point.
And then it becomes,
So
well,
it's like, you know,
at what point are they the
and
same?
degrees, right. It's by degrees. And it's a very tricky game to play with the universe, and also with your own, you know, destiny and your own heart and soul, and your own, if you want to call it karma, but whatever, it's more than that. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying here is that you can play that game, but it's dangerous. And there is, I mean, you know, get into a spiritual, you know, text, which is the raw material. I'm not a big fan of the raw material. I got into it deep enough to find that it was lying to you as well. But there is a principle in there that they talk about, which has to do with polarization in the human. And it's also written about in the Bhagavad Gita, if you want a whole different sort of spiritual book called, you know, right. That's from India. Mm-hmm. And I studied the Bhagavad Gita in depth. I had a natural proclivity. I took a class in it. My teacher was from India. He brought me aside. He said, "Oh my God, you know all this stuff." And I just knew it. I don't know how I knew it, just prior life probably. But anyway, so the idea behind the Bhagavad Gita, there's a very, very specific point at which the hero, supposedly the good guy hero, Arjuna, is told to kill his brother. He meets his brother in battle, and his brother's on the other side. And he hesitates because his brother is, you know, his brother. And basically there's a whole treatise about this. So I'm not going to, you know, spoil it by trying to tell you what it says. But the bottom line here is that this idea that you can get away with, in a sense, it's trying to like you want to trick the cosmos into, you know, so that you don't get committed to playing, you know, either side. And that way you think you're not going to engender the opposite of your actions. But that's that, you know, God doesn't like tricks actually, and doesn't, you know, sees through them, if you will.
Right.
So, and your soul, if you want to call it that, your soul, which is kind of like, it's a crystallization of who you are, and you're building your soul. It's growing. Okay. Mm-hmm. So your soul awareness can't be deceived. And so this is why polarization is very important. And this raw material talks about that. So the idea here is that you, in a sense, this is a simplification, but the idea is that if you truly are of the light, then you have to actually commit to being that and go down with that. I mean, you need to, you know, take what comes as a result of your light actions. Otherwise, you don't get the rewards, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting dynamic, very interesting spiritual dilemma that people have. But as far as I'm concerned, and it's played out, my knowledge of my own self, you can't cheat, in a sense, life. You can't cheat it.
Right.
So it knows, you know, the cosmos knows who you are and who you really are, you know, and you can't play the game and act one way and be another way. You see what I'm saying?
Amen.
So,
yes.
when you're doing that, like I said, it's a very fine line. And I have talked to 107 about this. I've even written articles analyzing his personality and all of this, because he's a very interesting character, like at least from my point of view, as like a character in a novel, by what the choices he's having to make and not make, and the commitments he's made, and so on and so forth. And I guess more than maybe some, I've paid a great deal of attention to this because of who I think he is, JFK Jr., and the fact that here is a soul who came in, for all intents and purposes, on the side of the light. And he is now part of an organization, a group called the White Hats. They're fighting, albeit an age-old enemy that his father was killed, murdered by, on top of it. Whether you want to say he actually died there or not is not the point. The point is that he was taken off the scene. Well, 107 JFK Jr. faked his death and went into a disguise. And since then, he's not also facing the world with his true self. There are karmic responsibilities involved in that. You might save something right now, but in the future, definitely going to have to pay at the other end. So it has to do with soul development in the end,
right?
And what we call enlightenment. So you can't cheat yourself, and you can't cheat life.
And look what happens when you do. We see the dark being, exposed right now, because they've been cheating themselves and they have been cheating life, and now look what's happening to them.
Well, that's why everything they do further is like a catalyst to wake people up, and wakes more people up. And at the end of the day, it's like the more humanity can raise its consciousness, and the more people that can raise their consciousness, the less power they have, because you can only get away with stuff if people are you can only really get away with what they want to get away with if the majority of the population is very asleep and at a very low level of consciousness, right? Then you can manipulate them like that, and then just keep them on that hamster wheel. But the second people start taking their power back and raising their consciousness, it's game over. And that's what I see happening right now. It's just a matter of how much worse does it have to get to this like big tipping point where it can start getting better, to put it simply, in my opinion. It's like, but how bad does it have to get for enough of us to wake up enough to like turn the planet into a beautiful place, rather than like more war and chaos and destruction?
But see, there are aspects to all of it that are maybe not talked about as much. So in a sense, okay, this is a different way to look at it, but the dark side is doing us a favor. They're actually serving the light.
Right.
This is perspective. And so they are being dark in order to force us to recognize ourselves as light. We are not them. We don't do those things. We know the dark from the light. We know the choices available to us, and we side with God as opposed to Satan, or whatever you want to call it, the devil, the negative side. So it's, again, but you can't just slice it and dice it very simply. So like I said, as consciousness rises, they do more dark things, right, to balance out. The trouble is that, as I have, learned over the time, was that if there's a needle, it was all much more to the dark on planet Earth than it wasn't in the middle. So what we're really trying to do is not eliminate the light, the dark. I mean, because it's yin and yang. You need both. And that's the way universes are constructed. So the bottom line is to bring it closer to middle. So there's a balance on Earth between light and dark. And so that's where these airy-fairy types, and what I call them white lighters, they have a misconception. And it actually goes into the Christian religion, the side of the Christian religion that like says, like, never say a negative thing, always talk about the good things. And they start, their behavior is all fake. And, Stepford wives,
Right.
Because they're actually trying to be so good that they're fake, and it doesn't work.
You're
So
not being authentic, right? And
yeah,
authenticity.
and that's insane. Okay,
Right.
they've lost the balance. They've lost the sense of balance, and in the sense, Democrats have actually, that's can be very pointed out per party in that sense. Okay, I'm not saying they're both not messed up. I'm just saying that the Democrats have definitely lost the concept of balance, because they don't see themselves. They see themselves as some, I don't know, God-given right to do whatever
You're
they want.
right. They infallible, right? Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like
And in the
no
conference,
self-awareness.
you saw it. I don't know if you both were there and saw it, but or saw it use the conference, the what do you call that, panel discussion.
Yeah.
I at some point in the panel discussion, assuming they keep it in, I actually said, it's the Democrats and the Republicans are like two sides of one coin, and they're both hypocrites because, and I explain it in terms of this, abortion thing, because the Republicans want to own a woman's body from the minute she gets pregnant. They want to own the woman and the child, and the Democrats want to own your whole life, your body, your whole life, because they want to shoot you up with everything under the sun that they decide you should be shot up with. So it's a complete contradiction on both sides. In other words, they're hypocrites.
Right.
So people need to understand that they are hypocrites. Okay. It's not like the right is right and the left is wrong. Okay. At what point do you want to own the human and control their body and control whatever else happens? Now,
Slavery is slavery, no matter what way you.
And you want to own a woman and her body and her kid, and so it goes. So it's insanity. I mean, from my point of view, this is the nature of the insanity, and we're living in this insanity constantly, where one side thinks one thing and the other side thinks the opposite thing, but they both think they're right. But in the end, if you look into it more deep, then you will see that they might both be missing the overall picture.
Exactly. And a lot of that comes from just not understanding the overall picture because of their limited beliefs, that they're literally keeping them chained down to this 3D reality. So I just think, like you said, zooming out really is a good way to understand what's going on. I did want to ask you, have you recently spoke to Mark Richards or not? Are you still in contact with him?
It's very difficult. Okay. I actually haven't interviewed him in 3 or 4 years. Now he's divorced his wife, Joanne Richards, and they are kind of like, I don't know if you want to call them enemies, but they're at odds, like a lot of divorced people, complete different. But see, when I was going to the prison, Joanne was facilitating, and she was, there. I'm not a big fan of prisons. Do I need to say that?
Right.
So it's been a lot more difficult also for me logistically because of my life, things that have been going on the last 4 years. I mean, they were closed down for probably 3 years. He wasn't even allowed to have visitors during the whole COVID debacle, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have got occasional letters. I write occasional letters to him, and I also get they have this online thing you can do now to talk to prisoners. But the trouble is, for whatever reason, most of the time I can't get through. And I don't know if he has the same problem exactly. So it's been a very dicey situation. And since the beginning, when I first started interviewing him, it was clear that anything that passed through the prison guards and all that kind of thing, like a letter or whatever, was never going to contain any real, good stuff like I get when I was face to face.
Right.
So that is a problem for me, because especially after, 12 interviews, I don't want to make nice with niceties, this is just absurd, right? It's more important to get the real stuff.
Yeah.
And so it kind of defeats the purpose at the moment that I have to do these public type things where it's a letter that the prison guards read and don't let through or whatever they do. It just doesn't seem to work. And I can't get into serious questions in this online thing because it's totally surveilled as well, and he can get in trouble and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, I understand.
Right.
What
That's
about
a problem? But along the lines of, I was sort of an extensive answer there to your question, but did you have a reason for asking me that?
well, just because I didn't know if there was any new information, that just any updates he had. I didn't know if he had shared anything with you, but it sounds like you haven't talked to him.
Not lately.
Right.
But there have been, along the years, there was some correspondence and some I published correspondence and things like that.
Right.
But generally speaking, no, not, especially the last, 2 years since things opened up again from COVID.
Right.
Thing.
And so this is kind of shifting gears, going back to the parallel Earth that you brought up earlier in the show Fringe, and you said you had some stories surrounding that. I truly believe that that's the reality, and there was tons of disclosure in that show. So, is it your opinion that they're doing kind of what they're doing in the show and bringing people from one timeline to the other to fight this war?
Well, I think it's a little more specific than that, but yes. I can't remember where I was talking or when I was talking. I was just, but I have talked about it. One thing is I have a conference, and you can go to the front page of my website, scroll down, and you'll see Time Travel in Other Worlds, a little banner on my website.
Okay.
And if you click on that, assuming everything works, you should get my presentation where I tell this story. It's a time travel story. Okay. Of a guy that got in contact with me and basically felt that he had found out that he was Werner von Braun's son, like an illegitimate child, I guess you might say, and also was a kind of is starting to find out that he might be sort of a time traveler himself, but also that there was a club, and this all took place in the Pacific Northwest, and that there were a number of people. One of them is Fermi, that scientist.
Yeah.
And I have other information that corroborated this guy's testimony, because he ran into, so they have parties or get-togethers in this Northern California community where people like Mark Twain show up and they know who they are. And some of them are much younger right now. And some of them have come over from parallel Earth. Okay. Now some are, I don't know whether they're clones or, time travelers actually, or whatever it is. Okay. But there's different levels of, and types of things that go on, but definitely, they saw Fermi there, for example. Well, I already have a witness who told me they met with Fermi, and this is long after Fermi died. And he was a very interesting witness and stuff. So, what can I tell you? On a psychic level, I know that this is true. Now, you can have your own psychic intuition as well, and so on. I just happen to know that this stuff is true. So it adds to the complexity of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with different levels. And even that, you've heard this, Barron could be a time traveler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Trump and even JFK Jr. may think he is. I know that Tesla might have thought he was. I think we all, this is my philosophy. I believe we're all time travelers. I think that's the nature of humans, that we have this ability to bilocate, to, through signal on locality. It's a principle of the universe that you can actually go forward and backward in time. People are just learning how to do it, sometimes consciously and stuff. So lately I have this perception of our reality that we're going through. And I don't know why, it just came into my mind, and it seems to be quite a good way to look at our times, at least for me. And so what it is that I've talked about this before, but Jack Sarfati was called up by an AI when he was young on the phone. And he tells this story. Well, Jack Sarfati is a very famous physicist. He's not the kind of guy that, is just going to tell some story. So right. He actually does believe sort of what I'm going to tell you now, which in a sense is that, see, that time is not linear. All time and space is technically, even scientists will tell you, it's simultaneous, and Native Americans will tell you that. Okay. So in a sense, it makes it into it's like a circle or a point. So it's, and it goes as deep as you want or as far out as you want, whatever. So the idea here is that when you stretch it out in a linear way, the way we see time as humans in this game, so to speak, you see one thing happen and then another thing happens, and it's like or some kind of order. And the bottom line is that technically it all happens at once. So that means that in a sense, what we're really doing, and I kind of look at it like now, in a sense, we're seeing everything that's ever happened roll out in slow motion. Okay. And we're either alive during that particular point in time, so-called, or not, but it doesn't matter because it's all going simultaneous. So this is because we see things in a linear fashion that we think like, oh, we're going through this right now and it's all happening, and stuff. And then, what happens in the future. And, there are a lot of diabolical future perceptions, right?
Right.
But if you really think about it and kind of follow the through line of what I'm talking about, of all time being simultaneous and so on, there's also this theory, this idea that it can't time, that if you're eternal, you can't sometimes be eternal and sometimes not. So right. I have a problem with people who think, you're going to have your eternal soul and then you're going to do this and then you're going to do that. And I'm like, but if you're eternal, you're always eternal. You you don't suddenly get to be eternal. You know what I mean? So either you are or you're not. So this is my concept of the universe, multiverse, everything, is basically that we are all here experiencing this, and energy can't be just created, they're destroyed. Basically, we just change form.
Yeah.
But we're always here. And I just want to say that, those Japanese movies that Quentin Tarantino does where people get killed right and left, and right. They glory in this. It's a very satanic kind of thing where they glory in the blood and gore. That's the same with the Illuminati. They take what I am telling you literally. Okay. So they think, therefore, there's no responsibility, but there is. Okay. Of course.
Right.
And they'll meet that down the road because things do play out, at least in our reality, in a sort of linear fashion. Right.
Right.
So what I'm saying here is, but in taking things literally, they think they can get away with things because you don't really die. You don't. Okay. Now you can sometimes die and sometimes not. In my viewpoint, okay, in this so-called game that we're talking about, you have to acknowledge that the logic of it is that you're always alive. You're always in some point of awareness, whether you have a body or you don't, or it's this body or some other body. So when you begin to really track into this kind of thinking, it opens up, a huge amount, because we are not limited. See, people want to talk in terms of limitation always. Okay. And we tend to be afraid of the future and afraid of what's going to happen because you're, limited and you could die and blah, blah, blah. And I also have to say that these are philosophies. Okay. But you don't have to believe what I'm saying or, anything, but it's an interesting way to consider the universe, because it also gets into, how we look at children, we think, oh, that little child, they're so vulnerable and so. But the reality is that little child actually just reincarnated from maybe an old man, someone who just lived, 60, 70 years or whatever and died. Or maybe it was a young soldier. Like I know these people in France that I met, went and met with them. And their son has all this stuff from the Civil War in America. He's a French kid. He's never been to America. His parents never talked about the Civil War, but he's got memorabilia all over his room. He's completely obsessed with that. He wants to go. He knows where he was born in America. He wants to go back there, during the Civil War.
Right.
And Barishka, for example, if you remember the famous Camelot interview we did with the Russian kid from Mars, as he was called, Barishka, right, who is, still alive, and he's still in Soviet, well, not Soviet Union, but in Russia. And, we went there in person and interviewed him, So he lived on Mars and was a soldier there and had full recall when he was a kid. Now, as he got into his teens, his memories became more distant, and he had less attachment to them, or whatever you want to call it. But it was very real for him,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We're all time travelers. It's something I'm absolutely fascinated with, and I think that we can naturally do it. We don't need a time machine per se,
right,
even though I do believe they have developed a time machine, and we have black government programs who are time traveling,
and crafts that travel through time and all the rest of it. Yeah.
And I know you're familiar with the Sean David Morton Sands of Time series, and he kind of talks about the origins of time travel in those stories. And by the way, what is his health status right now? Are you aware?
Well, yeah, I'm in contact with him and his wife. He's getting better. I mean, we worked really hard to attract healers to contact them, and I don't know their exact protocols, what they're doing. Right? I do know that the last word I got from his wife, Melissa, is that he is improving. That doctors have said that he's now improving. So I hope that that's the case. And I really, would love for him. I mean, he's a great old friend of mine. So I'd love to see.
Of course.
Alive and well and doing better. Yeah. So.
Right.
Same.
Yeah. Well, we'll ask our audience right now to send them some extra prayers and love and any healing energy that we might have.
Thank you.
So, yes. Because I mean, honestly, I think his books are absolutely incredible. And if you know how to decipher between, the facts and then the embellished parts, you can feel into what's true in those books. And I think there's a lot of disclosure.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's great. I agree. So, and I understand why he was, allegedly wrongfully imprisoned and why he was probably given throat cancer.
Yeah, because of those books, really.
Yeah, I believe that 100%. So, going back to my point on time travel, I definitely think that, we have devices that can traverse time, but ultimately, like there's a technology for everything organic we can already innately do. There's a technology that tries to mimic it. And I think that's what we see. I think that we ultimately.
Yeah, technology is basically a crutch. It's a tool or a crutch, depending on how you want to verbalize it.
Right.
So the reality of who we are is that we are capable of so much more than we think we are, and that we don't actually need those crutches. It's actually the nature of the secret space program that has chosen to go the way of the dark side, so to speak, that they are working on becoming controllers of the multiverse, that even Solar Warden is, and everything they're creating is terraforming other planets, is with the idea of creating a super soldier, what Mark Richards says, a passive super soldier that will take orders, that they want humanity to actually become a super race, just like Hitler did, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is their motivation, but it's a materialistic motivation, all right? And part of their, in a sense, their downfall is to become dependent on the crutch as opposed to developing these abilities yourself.
Right.
So it's just a word of caution. It's just like taking pills. I don't go to doctors. I don't, take any kind of those kind of medication things or whatever. I can't stand all that shit. I mean, I know I'm not normal, but
I'm
Still,
the same
yeah.
way. We're over
Same.
here. Yeah.
No, I just avoid it like the plague. And so like I don't think it's good for you. I think it's bad for your body.
For
I think the
yeah.
thinking is bad for your body. And I actually, can I share my Substack? Just I want to show you. Just
Yeah. Let
Yeah,
me.
I have
please do.
something. If I you have to allow
Yeah,
it.
I
So
am. I'm doing it right now.
all
Okay,
right,
you should be able to now.
all right. So let's see how I here it is. Okay, so I just wanted, because I didn't always have a Substack, but I created it actually a month or two ago when they took down my website for the millionth time, and I got so sick of not being able to publish. So I went onto Substack and I put a lot of articles on there. This is my latest, by the way, in case you want to have some fun. But anyway, I wanted to show everyone that I have an article that I sent out to everyone with Sean David Martin on it, that you can go to actually see how to contact him and his wife Melissa and stuff. So this is the article, and it's on. I called it Healing Sean David Martin, and actually that's my cat. Now I got that kitten. It's just
Oh,
Oh,
she's really wonderful. Her name is Spooky Bandit. But
oh,
anyway, so yeah, this is Sean. Like a month or two ago. I think he's gotten better, even better since then. I just wanted to bring that on the screen to show people. Go to my Substack and scroll down to that article, and then you can get contact if you want to help him. And they are quite behind. She can't go to work as much because she takes so much, spends so much time,
right.
healing him or helping him. And so, just want, in case you want to do something.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
absolutely. Thank you.
I mean, there's so many directions we can go, but I don't want to keep you too long. So maybe we can start wrapping this up. And if there's any last final words you would like to leave us with, that would be great.
Okay. Well, I think that it's kind of great. I actually saw this banner today, and I'm going to share that as well, because it's actually my philosophy of life in a nutshell. This is was called the Medicine Woman's Prayer, and it's actually very cool. So I have this philosophy. I I really think people should acknowledge each other for the power and the glory and everything we have access to, and realize that we're not helpless and we're not victims and all this kind of negative thinking that does not empower you. And when you look at this, this is a Native American, prayer. Yeah, in a sense, that's what it's all about. It's really about remembering your light and who you are, and what you're capable of. And every time people like they go out of their way so much, I'm not, it's a little bit of a Republican point of view, if you want to say, to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But in a way, universe and life is like that. In other words, you do the work and you get the benefits. So if someone else does the work or tries to walk for you, that never really pans out all that well. Doesn't
Right.
mean you shouldn't help each other. We just asked for help for Sean David Morton. But the reality is, and I've talked his ear off when he first got sick, saying, "Come on, Sean, you can do this." And he's like a meditator par excellence. He's been trained in India. He's been trained in Egypt by, incredible teachers and so. And so he has all this knowledge in him. But, we all reach places where we have sort of a roadblock or whatever it happens to be. And so, we need, oftentimes you can be triggered, stimulated by someone coming into your life and reminding you of these powers that we have at our disposal and how we can heal ourselves. So I guess if you want parting words, that kind of.
Amen. That was beautiful, and I agree. The reminders are crucial right now because we can understand these things and learn about it all day long, but sometimes life distracts us, and like you said, we all hit that roadblock. And I think what you said was beautiful. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for joining us today. Everybody listening, go sign up for Kerry's Telegram and her Substack. Yeah, I follow your Telegram, and yeah, you're constantly posting that. I don't know how you do it. I'm like, damn, she's always on top of it. Um, But yeah, so we'll make sure we put all the links below to everything that you do. And just thanks again for joining us. And we really appreciate you joining us. And I think that's it. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. We love you all. Thanks for joining us and have a great evening. Good night.